Okay, let's go back really quick. I want to review just the interview projects. So most of the projects I think I have graded and recorded. I apologize for the glitch we were having with Blackboard. Finally got it worked out last night. It was really kind of a strange deal. Some of your group members would be able to see the assignment in their grade book. Some wouldn't, as far as just a listing. And don't know how that happened in the course copy or the shell copy when we set the courses up. Never had that problem really before. So I do think I took notes, or some of you guys were emailing me, so I was taking notes. And when I was recording the grades, trying to make sure I had all group members that were getting the grade as well. So if I missed one by chance, please let me know. As I said, I was taking notes. I went back and looked after I graded everything. It looked like everyone had a grade in. One thing I will point out, I did notice, and I went back and even filtered through some email to make sure I did not miss any. I did notice there were some peer rubrics. I had some gaps missing in the grade book. So if I overlooked yours by chance, please let me know. Or if you forgot to submit that, I'll still accept it. If you just totally slipped past you and forgot, you can go in there and complete that and go ahead and submit it. I'll give you full credit for it if you can get that done and to me before tomorrow evening. So please let me know if I overlooked anything. Okay, I apologize again for the confusion on that, and it should be hopefully smooth sailing after that group project, because everything's individually based. So did notice some interesting points, did see a variety in experience based on different groups as far as the interviewees you had. Some might have only had 3 to 5 years experience, some had 20 plus. So it's kind of interesting just to see the variety of backgrounds that are out there. So did anybody find out anything interesting that maybe you did not anticipate before you started that, and then after you completed the interview? Anything anybody want to share? Any interesting point?
We have a big ESOL population in our school.
Yeah.
And I found out that there really isn't a ton of assessments that they can use with those students. And the ones that they do are typically nonverbal, but they're getting some that they also won't be able to really utilize, because most of them don't have, most of the psychs are not dual language. So it doesn't really do them any good to be able to give it both in Spanish and English if they can't speak Spanish themselves.
So based on that, let me just ask you this and see if your person shared. Did they have any major concerns due to that particular circumstance on possible over-identification just due to language barrier? Was there any concern on their part?
She honestly, I think if anything, there's under identification.
Okay.
She said that a lot of the parents of our ESOL students obviously don't speak English very well. And so maybe parents aren't noticing things at home, or it just, so they don't really inquire any further either if they do see things.
Okay, just kind of go with it and think it's normal then. Yeah. Anyone else? It's an interesting point. Thank you, Lauren, for sharing that. Anyone else?
Yes, one thing I was able to find out about is when we got to talking, what I teach is math and science.
Okay.
And I had noticed that there's a lot more going into language arts than math assessments. So I was able to ask about that, and I found it interesting when she said it's just because ELA kind of goes across everything. And she did admit that there was like a lot more need for math than is out there right now.
Okay, good point. Thank you, Jack, for sharing that. Anyone else find anything interesting out once you got to communicating with your interviewee?
I thought it was interesting how many tests we're either not allowed to give or not certified to give, or would have to take a whole separate training to give. Because, and I know you and I have talked about running into issues of what to do in next steps, but It's just like we have one school psych and she's split between multiple schools in our co-op. So I don't know how she gets everything done, but that was really interesting.
It is. You will find out that I'm gonna say jump out there and say majority of schools don't have anyone full-time. A lot of times they contract those services out just due to not having enough of a need to employ someone full-time just for that specific purpose. So a lot of times schools may belong to a co-op where there's multiple schools in a special services co-op and they share services. And that school psych or even the psychometrist is trying to take care of testing for anywhere, it could be upward of 10 plus schools. And so making sure that you get your information submitted and get on the schedule and meet the timeline as well is a challenge when your district is in that type of situation. So a lot of times you will see them employed full-time. It's going to be your larger districts. Of course, it's a numbers game. For sure, the more students you have, the more of a need there is. So it's an interesting point, Terry. They do cover a wide, vast area as far as square mileage and covering multiple schools. What you really have to be careful in a lot of schools that use a co-op and contract those services, a lot of times the director in that district will tell the teachers that, hey, basically, if you have a referral, we need to make sure if we're going to try to get it done in this current school year, it needs to be submitted on or before April 1. Anything comes in after that, it's going to roll over and more likely be in the next school year, just due to availability of services. So that happens a lot. Now, you may be in a school where you deal with that, where you have limited accessibility to those professionals. So good point, Terry. And they are stretched thin. And the district I was in previously for about 27 years, we were a member of a co-op. And I mean, those poor people are just ran ragged. They may cover from where the co-op headquarters or the LEA of that co-op setting, they may cover a 60-mile radius of that LEA where they're housed out of. So there's a lot of school districts in that 60-mile radius, and they cover a lot of miles. So interesting point. Anyone else? Anything interesting that stuck out in your mind you want to share with the group? Those are good points. No? Okay. Really, again, one of the main purposes of that assignment is to get you paired up with individuals, learn how to work with other individuals within a group setting. It does make it challenging when it's primarily online course, but I really felt like at least working one type of assignment in for the semester in this particular class is important, because once you're in that special education setting as that instructor, you're going to be working with multiple people on an ongoing basis. And so learning to deal with different personalities and how to work with individuals and communicate effectively is an important part of the role in that job. So that's one reason why we build that in. So everything moving forward is going to be individually based once you get past the interview group projects. So we'll see how that works out moving forward. Is there any questions on the interview project that you'd like to ask before we move on? Everyone good? You're just probably breathing a sigh of relief that it's past us and we're moving on, right? Okay, something to think about. Week 3, next week's going to be midterm for this course already. This is how fast they go. Is everyone liking the 8-week format so far? Yeah. So think back to when we were doing these and it was just 16 weeks. So yeah, I like them too, the 8 weeks. They really fly by. So let's look ahead kind of at our upcoming assignment you're working on, the informal assessment assignment. And let's talk briefly about that this evening, see if you have questions. I do have some, I will tell you this, I do have some that are already submitted, and I will go ahead and start grading those. So if you submit early before that Sunday deadline, when I check my emails, always look. and see if I have some assignments submitted. And if they are submitted already, I'll go ahead and review them and score them and get them back to you with feedback. So does anyone have any pressing questions on on the informal assessment assignment? And really the assessments, it's pretty wide open on informal because they are exactly what they're titled. They're very informal, and I will pop up some slides on here in just a minute, just kind of gives you some additional ideas on what informal assessments, what qualifies. Keep in mind, I've had questions related to this. You may be in the classroom working with students maybe that are being considered or anticipated that they're going to qualify for behavioral disorders, emotional disturbance. You can do these informal assessments, assessing behavior and monitoring that. It doesn't necessarily have to be strictly curriculum based. And I've had some questions come up related to that where you wanted to do some informal assessment tracking on behavior for this assignment, and that is acceptable to do that. So a lot of it depends on the setting you're in and the type of students you're serving. So any questions anyone wants to ask quickly before I go any further? I want to make sure to give you guys the opportunity to ask anything on the assignment.
This is due on Sunday, correct?
It is. It happened to fall with the timing of the 8 weeks coming off spring break, having that basically that week off, and how the length of time is for each assignment does fall on that. So like I said, if some of you guys are knocking these out and you want to get it in, that's fine. If you have something come up, I mentioned this the first night, you have a really rough week, there's things going on at home, whatever it may be, communicate that with me. I will work with you as long as you communicate and let me know. Okay, just don't spring it on me at the last minute. So I realize it's a big weekend. It's Easter coming up. So if you get them done, knocked out, just go ahead and submit. Again, if you run into something, reach out to me. Okay. Any other questions?
I have a question. So if we have like one of the informal assessments that we did, like one of them I think was my student was going to teach the lesson that we had just done. She was going to teach it to me on the board, right? So I could see. So she was the teacher for the day, but it didn't. I mean, it's okay if they fail too. I mean, I can document that too, right? It doesn't have to be. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, if they don't do as well, because we're trying to basically informal, you're trying to determine if they have understood the concepts or the objectives that you presented to them, Amanda, like the previous day. And so one way you want to informally assess this student is you're giving he or she the opportunity to go up and be teacher for the morning, whatever, and go back and try to teach that concept to you, and it gives you the opportunity to see, hey, did they truly understand? And if they don't get it right and they fail this part, it tells you something. That's one way to gauge whether they're fully grasping that concept. So yeah, that's perfectly acceptable. They don't have to go in there and ASAT at all. I mean, we're looking to see strengths and weaknesses, and in the report, each of the reports that you're going to do moving forward now, the informal, the normed reference, and the CBM, and I'll go over the rubric here in a few minutes. One of the categories is identifying strengths of that student that you observed during that informal assessment. Also, identifying weaknesses. So identify what you felt like was a strength, something positive, and then also we want you to identify weaknesses as well. And as we go through these 8 weeks, you're going to have that in these reports, and then at the end, all that is what you're going to use when you do that mock IEP, and you're laying out concerns of all their strengths and their weaknesses, and why you feel like, hey, we may need to proceed forward on testing, formal testing. Okay.
And when I had her do I saw that we were supposed to include those informal assessments. So the board teaching, there's nothing I have for that. Is it? I don't have an appendix for that.
No, and just document an appendix, informal assessment number 2.
Okay.
Student demonstration of understanding objectives through serving as teacher for the morning or teacher for the day.
Okay.
And just document it that way. Yeah.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Does all three of them need to be, because I have several of them, but do all three of them need to be in literacy or all three in math? Does it have to stay in this? Okay, great.
No, you can spread it out. You can do
Okay.
one math, one reading, and one even behavioral.
Okay, then I'm good. Thank
You
you.
may suspect or you may have concerns in both academic areas as well as you have concerns with behavioral disruptions that they are displaying in your classroom. So you can do informals on all three of those areas.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you bet.
So can I do a phonological awareness test and reading and spelling to see, because I have a student who can't read very well, just to
Mhm.
see how I can proceed further? Would
Exactly.
that count? Okay.
Yeah. They don't all have to be three related to math, or they don't all have to three be related to phonetics. I mean, you can mix and match them up.
Okay, so this is not a current lesson I'm teaching. I just want to see where he is so I can teach in the future what he needs.
That's exactly
But
right.
that's okay.
Because again, these are going to tie into the very last project of doing the mock IEP.
Right.
And when you do that, because part of that mini portfolio that includes that mock IEP is going to have a lesson plan for each of the assessments, a lesson plan that you do for the informal, a lesson plan that you design for the normed, and also for the CBM. So again, you're going to collect that information all through the rest of this course and then apply it toward the lesson plan, which I kind of showed you the template the first night. And then also you'll tie it into when you present the information in the mock IEP.
Okay, thank you.
So again, all this is going to tie together, and you'll see at the end, you go, oh, okay, I got it now. This is why we did all these and collected this information right here, and we're going to compile it, and it all ties together. Okay. Any other questions? Everyone feel pretty good so far about informal and kind of what you've decided you want to use for this? Okay, this is just a good starting point as we proceed. Okay, the next thing I want to do quickly is kind of go over the rubric, and I'm going to point out a couple of things, because a lot of times I found if I didn't specifically point these things out, that as graduate students are going through and developing their report, they tend to just blow right over these things, these couple of items, or they tend to shy away from them because they've never really had to do it before. And the items actually are worth quite a few points on that rubric. So I'm going to point that out to you. So if you'll give me just a moment, I'm going to share my screen. If you'll bear with me just a second. We'll go over the rubric and make sure you guys understand it. Can everyone see my screen? I'm starting to scroll down now to get to the rubric part for the informal. Again, too, I'm going to remind you that I do have examples if you go to the SPED 805 resources tab in the left-hand column on Blackboard, you'll click on that tab, it'll open up a new page, and you'll see like the peer assessment rubric, the lesson plan template. And if you go down toward the bottom of that page, you'll see I have sample reports, and I've got one for the informal, one for the normed reference, and one for the CBM. So it's a good example for you to look at kind of how this is formatted. So here we are. This is the exact rubric that I go off for this upcoming assignment. So basically in your first section is all the identifying information. Just make sure that you name the specific test. So for the informal, you're going to have 3 different ones that you use, and you'll just kind of name each one of them, and also the date or dates that you did these. So you may have done them all three on one day. You may have spread them out. Just make sure you list those dates. Briefly describe the skill that you're looking to kind of measure or determine if they understood the objectives that you taught. Kind of tell me what the purpose of it is. You know, you want to state the purpose of what the test was and the reason why you selected the specific informal assessments. Okay, Angela, you mentioned a while ago, can they be different? And I mentioned, yeah, you may have a behavioral concern. So I selected an informal off of that. Now it concerns with Johnny's adding and subtraction skills, and also with his blending sounds and his reading skills. I mean, it's going to vary. So just kind of briefly explain that. The next thing you're going to drop down, the next section is giving a background. I'm going to point something out here to you on this section. If you guys are going to or have the ability to use the same student for each of your assessments moving forward. So if you're going to use little Johnny for your informal, the norm, and the CBM, once you do this background, you can use it on the next two assignments. Okay, there's no sense in reinventing the wheel and having to redo it if it's the same student. Is everyone with me on that? If you're using a different student for each of them, make sure that you update that. Okay, because it's going to be a different pseudonym. Don't use the student's real name. You can use the initials or a pseudonym for that. You want to, if they already have been identified with a disability, include that. If they have not, just say suspected deficiencies in reading, math with possible behavioral disorder. Also mention what school level, what grade that they're in, okay? Also give a little bit of background on their academics, include maybe a little bit about their past performance, some, you know, if you got some test scores on them, just kind of briefly explain how that student's done academically up to the point that you started administering those informal assessments, okay? Teacher observation. If you have the regular classroom teacher give you a little bit of feedback, you can include that. A little bit about pertinent family information. And what this is, briefly describe their background at home. This student may be have been in the foster system and is living with foster parents. This student may be living with grandma because mom and dad are in prison. So tell just a little bit about their background on that, about the home environment. Might be a mixed family. Might be mom and stepdad. Okay, so just kind of tell a bit about that and any other relevant background information you think is important to include. This is where I really want to point out a couple things to you, because a lot of times students will skip a couple items within the test results and interpretation section. And this is where a bulk of your points come from on the next three assignments. Each three moving forward, this section is weighted completely different for each of them. So we're going to focus now on the informal. So this one item alone, 30 points, is focused on explicit analysis of the results with some supporting data. Okay, so you want to really explain the results that came out of these informal assessments. The next two items, something that I mentioned a while ago that maybe you haven't had a lot of experience doing, but we're going to talk through this briefly here. And it's pretty much wide open, especially with informal, because it's just going to be basic information for the informal when we're asking you to put the data, the information you gather, and present it in either a table, a chart, or a graph. Okay. There's really no right or wrong way to do it. It's just you taking the information you've collected and putting it in one of these three visual representations to help the parent understand, especially when you do the mock IEP. And what I always tell the student is, imagine if you were across the table, Angela or Alice, and you were sitting there talking to the parent, we can go and give them a lot of data and spew off a lot of statistical information, and it may go in one ear and right out the other. But if we can take that same information that we just gave them verbally and also present it to them in some type of visual aid or visual representation, a lot of times it'll click and they're like, okay, I got you, I understand, because they're seeing it versus just hearing it. And so that's, we're trying to get you to develop basically the skill set and also kind of get in the habit of doing that, because it helps those parents understand. Now, moving forward ahead in the normed reference and the CBM, the charts, the visual representation is going to be more detailed, obviously, than the first one on the informal, because we're collecting a lot more specific data. Okay. So make sure you do that. Develop the chart, the table, and label it. Okay. That way, I always tell everybody, that way, if you show it, an elementary student can look at it and tell and determine what you're trying to represent. Okay. On this, so you're going to do the table, then also explain the information right below the table. You're going to kind of give a little narrative form of what you put in there. Okay. Those two items alone are 19 points. Okay. So moving ahead on the other assignments, this area right here it'll have a lot more points to it. Okay. Just make sure you do that. Some type of visual representation in there. Here are the next two items.
I have a question.
Yeah, Angela, go ahead.
On the chart, so we'll just have one data point on it, or do you want us to use like some other things that we've had so you can see the growth?
You can do either way. It's
Okay.
fine for this assignment. Okay,
Okay.
for this one. I realize informal, it's you're only really having that one specific data point to determine. If you want to compare it to other information you already have up to that point, that's great. If
Okay.
this is a student maybe you haven't worked with and you're having to borrow this student to do these on, you can just represent that basic information. Okay. The next two items under test results and interpretation goes back to what I said a while ago about highlight what you felt like were some strengths that this student displayed during this setting when you're doing informal assessment. Also, you want to highlight some weaknesses that you observed during that and kind of explain, the weaknesses and also the strengths. And so that will wrap up the test results and interpretation section. And really, within these reports, this section is going to be the longest part of the report, whether it's the informal, normed, or CBM. Okay. That's where a bulk of your information is. Then we have our next section is basically a recommendation and conclusion section. And so what it's asking you to do in this section is explicitly highlight instructional planning and recommendations. And so this is where you are going to come up with some recommendations for instruction moving forward from this point based off just the informal, what you saw as far as strengths and weaknesses. What would you recommend as far as instruction planning or recommendations for this particular student? And it could be even going in and doing some modifications on some of the content that's going to be coming up that student covers, grade level modifications. Some of those things you could write in as recommendations. Okay. Also, you might want to support that recommendation just based on that data that you collected. Then the last section, basically, I'm looking at some organization and mechanical things within the body of the report. Basically, were you able to present the information in a relevant, coherent, and cohesive manner? Is it clear or is it just all over the place? Okay, does that make sense? Also, I'm starting to focus more on APA formatting. It's pretty relaxed with it on the on the interview, just due to the nature of that. And so here's where we'll start really focusing in on some APA formatting on that, so just be aware of that. Also look at spelling, grammar, sentence structure, and then also the last thing, sometimes students forget this, make sure you include the parent permission form with this when you submit it, okay? I did have a question. I'll go ahead and throw this out there. It was an email question earlier in the week from a student that's already working on the report. Wanting to know, hey, do I need to go ahead and list all these assessments now when I have them sign it? And my advice to them was list what you're doing for the informal, have that parent sign it. And then as you make your final decision on the norm reference, because we have a couple weeks in between, you can go in there and write that in and just advise the parent, hey, this is my next one. I made the decision after I did the informal. I felt like this one's going to be best. And just advise them, this is what I'm going to give, but go ahead and write it on that permission form and then attach it with your additional test to that same form that the mom or dad has already signed, and include it for a report 2, and then do the same thing for report 3. Okay, does that make sense? All right. And so on this one, we'll be looking at 125 points total for this assignment. So you can see out of the 125, it goes back up to test results, 55 of it's right there. Okay. Is there any questions about really what we're going to be looking for in the body of the paper? Just want to make sure everyone really understood that. Don't forget your tables, charts, and graphs. Okay, again, this first one, it's going to be pretty basic. It can be, you can design that or utilize, you can do it in Word, PowerPoint. If you have some other platform that you really like and feel comfortable, you can do it there. Those were just 2 common ones that have been used. If you're unsure on what those will look like, you can also look at the sample report that I have posted for this particular assignment by going to the 805 resources tab as well. Okay. Any questions on the rubric that we went over? Everyone feel good, okay about it? Okay. I'm going to start share on that. And I've got one other thing I want to go over quickly. So the readings this week are focused on chapter 6. So the PowerPoint that is posted in there is kind of a combination. So I'm going to be really selective on kind of what I go over with you before we in class, because it's got some stuff jumping ahead to the CBM, curriculum-based measurements, and I don't want to throw that at you and then get you confused. So I'm gonna focus mainly on the informal quickly. So the PowerPoint that's in for week 3 is focusing on chapter 6 readings. And so I kind of slid down toward the end of that PowerPoint where it focuses more on informal. So I'm just going to go over this briefly. Basically, informal tests could be also teacher-made test as well. So basically, if it's teacher-made, you're usually testing only at the knowledge level of that student based on their grade level. Years in the profession. So it doesn't matter if you're a brand new first year teacher or if you've been in it 20 years, you know what you need to assess and you can go in and design that. Okay. It's not going to affect the outcome. It's not like we're looking at a norm reference test. And also teacher-made tests know the differences between what students and teachers thought was important. So each one of you may focus on something completely different. You know what's important for the student you're working on here. Okay, there's really no right or wrong. So this may be a little tough for you to see with me sharing my screens a little bit condensed, but some other test format construction, and it's talking about errors on here, but I'm just going to kind of point out some different items on here that you could structure it after. Looking at matching items, it could be multiple choices, something that gives you a quick look, a quick way to determine whether the student understands the objectives and concepts, okay, or skill sets that you think they should understand. It could be a short written response. On here, they put essay exercises, sometimes a short, simple written response, couple sentences to see if they've got the main idea. Also some completion items, true, false items, interpretive exercises. Just a few. I just kind of wanted to point that out to you. Other informal methods of assessment. Probably, I would say more, a little bit older. When we're looking at error analysis, also a task analysis where they have to perform certain tasks and you're kind of observing to see if they're able to do those successfully, some direct measurement. CBAs, also criterion related assessment, checklist, a list of academic or behavioral skills that must be mastered. So Angela, I used you as an example a while ago. It may be a behavioral concern. So you may have a behavioral checklist as one of your informals on certain things that you feel like that student should have mastered for their age in that classroom setting. You can do a quick checklist on them as well. Student work samples can be one. I'm skipping over here. Student work samples, also some permanent products, and it gives a description, products that are made by the student that may be analyzed for academic or behavioral interventions. Okay. And then also interview the student. Quick, short interview, a few questions to see if they can verbally describe some things over what they covered. Individual reading inventories also is another option as well that's commonly used. Also, informal assessments in spelling. Some of you guys might be interested in using spelling, have a concern there. CBA, often referred to as old-fashioned spelling test, or have them say the word using it in a sentence. Also analyzing errors, phonetic ability, visualization, and linguistic performance and spelling. Those are just a few. Informal assessment, if you are suspecting some things with writing, the writing skills, have them provide some written work samples, and you can develop a little rubric for that. Also give them maybe story starters and ask them to complete it. That's another way of informally assessing them. And maybe give them 1 minute to do it, or even 3 minutes. Sometimes giving them a little time limit, a quick story starter, and see if they can finish it for you. So those were just a few I wanted to show you. And then also criteria for evaluating if it's a performance task. Maybe have a benchmark that you start them on, and then assess them from that point. Also, you can require students to access prior knowledge in completing the task. You can use higher order thought processes, including creative thinking. And so those are just a few I wanted to go over with you on performance tasks. Not many, I will tell you this, previous semesters, not many of our students have used a performance task type of informal assessment, maybe having them complete multiple tasks. Unless it's older students, oftentimes we don't see too many of these used for informal, but again, doesn't mean that you can't. And a couple of the last ones quickly, portfolio assessment is often sometimes used for informal. May have students samples of their writing. They could do some story mapping, also reading logs. What the students read, vocabulary journals, could be artwork, daily journals, writing ideas. I mean, it's just, there's a variety of things you could do for informal. Okay, it's pretty much endless on what you could do. And then the last one talks about norm reference. That's on a couple weeks ahead, so I really won't go over that one at this time. So we'll come back and revisit it. Any questions on informal? Kind of cover that quickly, but everyone feel good about the assessment you have and putting that together for when the assignments due Sunday.
I do have a question. So
Okay.
one of my informal assessments I was going to do is because I'm a behavior teacher.
Yeah.
And so they have behavior charts that they have all day long, but the behavior chart that I have is like our district behavior chart for our kids who have BIPs. And so there are several behaviors that we monitor in 15-minute blocks throughout the whole day. Would that be one that I should use?
You can pull
Okay.
information off that. That could be
Okay.
one of your sources.
Yeah, so there's lots of different things that are being monitored. I mean, there's like several, I mean, it's kind of ridiculous, but.
And what you might do is just pull focus on 3 or 4 of those items if you want,
Okay, that's what
and
I'm
just
gonna do.
focus in on those. And similar, going back to the comment I made a while ago, behavioral checklist.
Mhm.
So your district has a chart with a wide variety of behaviors. It sounds like, is that correct, Bridget?
Yes.
Yeah, so very similar, the checklist and the chart. With there being that many, I would just focus on 3 to 4 for this and monitor it. Okay.
All righty.
Any other questions? Clarification? No? Okay, if not, I'm gonna let you go. Remember, if you have questions, feel free to email anytime. I check those again early in the morning and then also right around 5 or shortly thereafter. And if you finish up your informal assessment, want to submit that before that deadline Sunday, I will check for those as well and go ahead and score it and get it back to you. Okay. Okay. If nothing else, you guys enjoy the rest of your week and have a great Easter weekend as well. Thank you, guys. We'll see you.
Dr. Posey, I have a couple questions about the future assignments if you have a couple minutes.
Sure, you bet.
And I had a question too.
Okay.
Mine's about the last assessment because I had asked for the extension because I
On
was
the
the only person
CBM?
in my group. Well, on the
Oh, the
on the
previous one?
interview.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I was the only person in my group.
Mhm.
Much like the other people, I only had the thing that came up about the, what is it? The peer assessment collaboration rubric.
Yeah.
So I put everything in one.
Okay.
Everything's there. It's all
Okay.
in
I'll go
one.
back over there and make sure I just didn't blow right past it. So I appreciate you letting me know. I'll go
I'll
on.
be honest, I just got it put in.
Oh, okay. All right.
So, I mean,
that's probably why I didn't
stopped
see it.
like a minute ago.
Yeah. I
Yes,
looked again right
double-checking
about 4
typing.
o'clock. So
But
okay.
yeah, so I just wanted to let you know
Okay.
that was there and that I put everything together. So we
That'll
got it.
work. That'll work. I can review it off of that and then slide over in the other category and drop your grade in that for the rubric. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
You bet. Thank you for letting me know. Anyone else? Questions? Past assignments? Terry, did you have one?
Yeah, so I know we had emailed a little bit back and forth about what to do for the norm relative testing. Will FastBridge work for that testing? Because that's what my district uses.
Yeah, you can and I've allowed them to do that before. I know in the syllabus they tried to steer away from that, but I've allowed students to do that.
Okay.
Because it varied by semester and like one particular semester I'm thinking of, I had several of them that were employed districts and that was one they used. So I allowed them to do that. So
okay. There's a couple of us in my district in this class together and
yeah.
that's what we use is FastBridge.
Yeah, we'll go ahead and use it for that.
So that's what I'll use for the norm relative. And then what are examples of CBM like testing?
So really, when you get into the CBMs, a lot of times it's going to be, I'll just tell you some common ones are oftentimes assessments that are provided by the curriculum that you are using, the textbooks. Also, another resource, and a lot of our students in previous semesters use it, and it's got a lot of information in there. It's easycbm.com. And you can go on there and it's got it broken down to where you can pick multiple assessments based on particular content areas as well. I mean, whether it's reading, phonics, you name it. You can go in there and pick the category, and then go down and look at a particular grade level, and you can pull them off there and use them. And I've had a lot of students in the past that utilize that website. It's pretty handy.
Okay.
So you
Terry,
might check that out. It give you some ideas. It's been very helpful in the past.
Okay. Thank you.
Terry, I would just share too, this is Diane Garvey. We use FastBridge in our school district as well.
Yeah.
And FastBridge has a progress monitoring CBM.
Okay.
So there's another source for you too.
Okay. Well, I was just trying not to use FastBridge for both of them.
Yeah.
Is what I was trying to
Yeah,
avoid.
no, I got it, and I appreciate that. So like I said, you might want to try that website. Again, we've had multiple students use it in the past, and they really enjoyed it. So I mean, it just provides a lot of resources.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Anyone else? No, I'm good. Okay. You guys have a great evening. We'll see you. Thank you.
Thanks.